thank you for joining me. I am your host, Bryan Lee Whatley. On this special segment, we're talking about using animals during paranormal investigations. I like to think that most, if not all, animals have a very strong relation to their senses, especially their sixth sense. Some are more keen and better apt to use those as a paranormal tool than others. But you have to know when to use them for the right and best advantage for the case and when to bring them along. Just like with any other tools we use, sometimes they work and sometimes they don't. I don't believe in every tool is needed for every investigation. I pack my equipment cases accordingly to the pre-case work analysis, and the same applies here. Use your best decisions on whether or not to bring an animal or to have one of the owners stay at the home. Most people's animals or pets are considered as family. I like to think that mine are like my kids. I love them very much, and I know when they are happy and when they are sad, when they are sick, or worse, when they are scared. Animals don't have a life factor to them. They won't stop and do something that isn't real, nor will they hide it from you just to make you feel easier, better, or safer. They just don't do it. Well, sometimes they will. If they ate your new pair of shoes or they got into the cookies that you left sitting on the counter, then you come home and you give them that "Max, what did you do?" look and tone. Then they really don't know what they're in trouble, but sometimes they don't even realize it was just that tone that you were using. But that reaction from them is pretty obvious when it knows it has done something wrong that it shouldn't have. When it comes to the para or above normal reactions, their natural reactions, it's an instinct that's pretty much like ours. It's a fight or flight, instant and true. There are some suggestions and items to think about when deciding to use an animal on a paranormal investigation. Let's start and look at some of the science behind it with a sensory comparison of humans to animals. For example, hearing. According to a report done by Louisiana State University, the ranges for animals are as follows. Humans hear at 64 Hz to 23,000 Hz. Dogs hear at 67 Hz to 45,000 Hz. Cats hear from 45 Hz to 64,000 Hz. And parakeets, or normal birds, hear from 200 to 8,500 Hz. So dogs and cats can hear at a higher Hertz than humans, which means they hear at some ultrasonic levels. And ultrasound is just sound that's at a frequency that's greater than the human limit of human hearing. Now for sight, according to WeBeCoexist.com, many birds can see differently. Pigeons, for example, can see literally millions of different hues and are thought to be among the best at color detection ability of any animals on Earth. They have more cones than humans in their eyes, thus accounting for the ability to see at least 5 spectral bands. Cats and dogs do not have strong vision. They rely on scent and sound primarily as their sensory detection. Cats in particular have a weak vision. They are colorblind, and cats are more so than dogs. Dogs can sometimes tell the difference between yellow and blue, for example, or most cats can only detect a little color and are best at focusing on an object narrowly, and it's mostly used for hunting. But they do have better night vision than humans. Both cats and dogs have better perspective and depth perception due to the placement of their eyes than human beings do. Snakes have 2 sets of eyes. One set is the normal set that you see, and they detect color quite well. But they also have vision pits that detect heat and see living creatures like an infrared detector, like what we would use as a thermal camera. There is no getting away from a snake once you're spotted, so hiding behind that closed door won't help. Luckily, most snakes are more likely to retreat than attack. Now, for some other general factors just to consider, who owns the animal? Is it whoever owns the animal in general, whether it's an investigator or the client, make sure that they are highly aware of the particular animal and its behaviors. Watch out for things that are really out of the ordinary. if it sleeps a lot but suddenly it can't sleep, if it stays away from a particular area, like being scared from a corner or a closet, if it is normally does not make any noise but suddenly does, if it is reacting to something during particular times and then it's continuous or instant, and if its normal noise changes tone, such as the pitch, whether it's higher or lower. Make sure the animal won't shed a lot to cause hair or dander false type orbs in photography. And be able to be around strangers and not aggressive towards others. Make sure the animal is house trained. You don't want to step in something or have strange smells contaminate your environment. Trust me, that has happened. Make sure the animal does not eat or chew on stuff, especially your equipment, and that it won't break things by accidentally jumping around or playing. If it's the investigator's animal, well, sometimes it's safe to say that it's probably a strong connection and a value for the animal to be at the case. It just depends on how much you trust that investigator and its relationship to its animal. If your animal breaks something, it's just as if the investigator breaks something and you have to replace it. Always keep that in mind. Now, if it's the client's pet, then pay attention to what the owner has said about the case and the animal during the pre-case reports. You can get a lot of information just by asking questions about the pet's reactions. And consider if it's an inside or outside domestic animal. So if it's inside, I've heard many teams before talk about making sure the animal is not inside the place of activity. Well, I believe this is based on the client's reports and the animal for where and why it has reacted, and it is important. If it will basically mess up your equipment by chewing or scratching on it, like we mentioned, this is always a per case basis to bring one along. I can't say that enough. You don't want a dog chewing up equipment, cord, camera, recorder, or anything just because it's new to him and has your scent on it. If you need the animal in the investigation and it is a chewer, then make sure the animal can't get to your equipment. You try to raise it up so it can't hurt itself. Also, make sure it's used to new people and can handle new people around so that it won't bite anyone or cause false positive reactions to new people. Now, if it's outside animals and they're free roaming, then you would need to make sure that you have a camera set up somewhere to catch where they mostly go and whether or not their reactions have been reported. You also want to consider the type of animal and its abilities. Like we mentioned earlier from Louisiana State University and We Be Coexist, dogs have senses and smells mainly, and their hearing. Their sounds, whether they bark loudly, growl in a form of protection to protect you, and whines and whimpers, or just yaps out of the ordinary. Movements with a dog is such as that it sits and stares at something, or if it runs if it's scared. Watch its ears twitch in the direction of the sound. Now, cats, for senses and smells, for hearing, sight for night vision. Now, again, with its sounds that it would normally make, whether it meows louder or it hisses at nothing. And its movements are pretty distinct, whether it sits and stares at something that isn't there. It jumps, its back arches, its hair stands up when it's hissing, and it watches something that goes by, or runs to a safe place and continues watching it. Now, birds, for sounds, are extreme chirping and squeaking above normal. And when its movements are extreme flapping that are inside the cage, make sure that it doesn't hurt itself being contained inside that cage. Most people cover the bird cage at night, and so if this is the case, you will need to uncover it to observe it. Aquariums keep animals such as snakes, mice, fish, etc. Now, you won't be able to hear them or see them as much, especially out of their environment. So you would basically have to set one camera up to watch them and their reactions, and use that risk of not being able to cover the rest of the room. If you have more than one camera to set up in the room, then spending one camera just on them might be worth it. Again, you would have to take this and listen to the client's reports and make a judgment call for your case and the amount of equipment that you have. If there are barn animals, such as horses or sheep, and they are kept in the barn, then you have to treat them the same way as you would as the domestic animal inside the house. If they are farm animals that are free roaming, then you need to treat them just as they would be the domestic animal that stays outside. For some general do's and don'ts, do be very cautious when using animals. Just as with humans, always practice safety, safety, safety. You have to make sure the animal doesn't get harmed, or that it gets so scared that it freaks out and harms some investigator. Do, again, make sure the animal is well trained and able to get along with others. Don't just bring an animal along because you think Paris Hilton thought it was hot and you're going to look good doing it, and it's cool. Don't put anything in the way of the animal's natural pattern. For example, I had an investigator put an audio laptop on the floor one time. Well, when we were reviewing the control station camera that night, we noticed that the cat kept going over to the audio laptop, basically standing on it or moving it around by scratching on it. Well, in trying to figure out why, we went over to the laptop and looked around. And someone accidentally put the laptop on the floor in front of the cat's water and food bowl. It's a good thing that we noticed this before we reviewed the audio from that laptop and heard an evil scratching sound coming out of nowhere. Overall, pets do have an advantage on being receptive to paranormal anomalies. However, as I said earlier, you have to watch out for them, your case, and the people around them. Use them at your best judgment. Remember to watch them during the investigation and also during the video analysis. Sometimes, if you let them free roam in the house, they will be in a room that you aren't at a particular time, so having as many cameras around will help capture evidence on active situations. Just as you would consider a human personal reaction of being startled or hurt or its head turning sharply to look at something or from hearing something as a partial proof of some type of paranormal activity, animals can provide the same. Thank you for taking time to listen to this special segment of using animals during paranormal investigations. I am your host, Bryan Lee Whatley. Have a great night.